Welcome back to Pro Revenge Narratives, where today we unearth a story of transformation, a journey from profound heartbreak to the chilling precision of calculated retribution. Imagine, for a moment, being pushed to the very edge, reduced to an existence defined by tears, by a pain so deep it feels like it will never truly heal. But what if, in that abyss of despair, something fundamentally shifts? What if, as the last tear falls, a new, terrifying resolve ignites, and the individual who caused your agony suddenly finds their own world beginning to unravel, piece by agonizing piece? This isn't just a story about getting even, it's about the genesis of a nightmare, a meticulously constructed downfall, orchestrated by someone who, against all odds, chose not just to survive, but to exact a price so steep, it would alter the very fabric of their tormentor's reality forever. This is Sarah's story. And trust me when I say, the moment she stopped crying was the moment his nightmare truly began. If you've ever felt the sting of injustice and dreamed of perfect retribution, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Pro Revenge Narratives to make sure you never miss another deep dive into the art of calculated payback. Our story centers around Sarah and a man we'll call Mark. They had been together for 5 years, a relationship that, to Sarah, felt like the cornerstone of her entire adult life. Mark was charismatic, charming, the kind of man who could light up a room and make you feel like the most important person in it. He was a rising star in the tech industry, a brilliant programmer with an innovative mind, and Sarah, a talented graphic designer, was his steadfast partner, his biggest supporter. Their life together was idyllic on the surface, cozy evenings in their shared apartment, ambitious plans for the future, and a deep, seemingly unbreakable bond. Sarah believed in Mark wholeheartedly, pouring her emotional energy, her time, and even a significant portion of her savings into supporting his dreams. When his startup hit a rough patch, it was Sarah who worked extra hours, took on freelance projects, and encouraged him through every setback. She even loaned him a substantial sum, a significant chunk of her inheritance, to keep his fledgling company afloat, believing implicitly in his vision and their shared future. She saw it as an investment in their life, their dreams. What she didn't see, couldn't fathom, was the viper coiled beneath the charming exterior. The cracks began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Late nights at the office became more frequent, phone calls went unanswered, and a growing emotional distance began to chill their once warm connection. Sarah, ever the understanding partner, attributed it to the immense pressure Mark was under with his startup. She offered support, reassurance, and tried harder to bridge the growing gap. She cooked his favorite meals, left encouraging notes, and waited patiently for the storm to pass. But the storm wasn't passing, it was gathering strength, and it was aimed directly at her. The truth, when it finally crashed down, wasn't a slow reveal but a brutal, instantaneous demolition. It came in the form of a photograph, anonymously sent to her phone. A photo of Mark, laughing, hand in hand with another woman, entering a high-end restaurant. The woman wasn't just another woman, she was a major investor in Mark's struggling startup, a formidable businesswoman named Evelyn. The accompanying message was short and cruel. He's been seeing her for months. She's secured his funding. You're just a liability now. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. The world tilted. All the late nights, the unanswered calls, the distance. It wasn't stress. It was betrayal. It was a calculated, cold-blooded maneuver. Mark hadn't just cheated. He had used her love, her loyalty, her financial support, as stepping stones to secure his own ambitions with Evelyn. The worst part was the timing. He had accepted her inheritance money just weeks before this affair had escalated into a serious, strategic partnership. He hadn't just broken her heart, he had financially gutted her, leaving her emotionally and economically vulnerable, all while building his future on her ruins. The ensuing confrontation was a blur of Mark's evasions, gaslighting, and eventually, a chilling indifference. He admitted the affair, not with remorse, but with a cold pragmatism, stating that Evelyn represented his future, his company's future, and Sarah simply no longer fit into that picture. He dismissed her pain, brushed off her pleas for repayment of the loan, and ultimately, with a shrug, told her to move out. He even suggested she was being overly dramatic. His words, delivered with such a casual cruelty, were a final, devastating blow. He made it clear he saw her not as a person he had loved, but as a temporary utility, now discarded. In that moment, watching him stand there, devoid of empathy, Sarah felt a profound, primal scream trapped inside her. She left the apartment, the home they had built together, carrying only a small bag, leaving behind years of memories, all of her savings, and the shattered pieces of her trust. For weeks, then months, Sarah was a ghost. She moved in with a sympathetic friend, barely ate, barely slept. Her vibrant, creative spirit withered. The tears flowed constantly, a relentless river of grief, anger, and humiliation. She replayed every interaction, every loving gesture, every moment of shared dreams, searching for the signs she had missed, the red flags she had ignored. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was existential. She felt foolish, naive, utterly destroyed. She tried to reach Mark about the money, about their shared assets, but his responses were either dismissive or non-existent. He leveraged his legal team, knowing Sarah, financially crippled and emotionally shattered, couldn't fight back effectively. He cut her out of their shared life with brutal efficiency, leaving her with nothing but the echoes of his empty promises and the crushing weight of her own foolish generosity. The world felt bleak, color drained, hope extinguished. She cried until her eyes were swollen, her throat raw, and her soul felt hollowed out. She cried for the love she lost, the future that evaporated, and for the naive woman she used to be. Every tear was a testament to his cruelty, a tribute to her pain. Then, one gray morning, as she sat staring out the window, another tear trickled down her cheek. But this one felt different. It felt empty. It was the last one. As it reached her jawline, Sarah felt a profound, almost electric stillness settle over her. The well of grief had, finally, run dry. In that quiet, empty space, a new emotion began to stir, cold and sharp. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even pure anger, at least not the chaotic, uncontrolled kind. It was something far more potent, far more dangerous. It was resolve. A clarity born from absolute devastation. Mark had taken everything from her, her money, her home, her trust, her sense of self. He had reduced her to a weeping shell. And in doing so, he had unwittingly forged something else entirely. He had created a survivor stripped of illusions, a woman who understood the true depths of his depravity, and who, with nothing left to lose, was now ready to take everything from him. In that singular, pivotal moment, Sarah understood that crying had been a luxury she could no longer afford. Every second spent weeping was a second he was winning. Every tear was a victory for him. And she would not allow him to win. Not anymore. The seeds of retribution were planted. Her revenge wouldn't be impulsive or emotional. It would be a game of chess, meticulously planned, legally ironclad where possible, and utterly devastating. She understood Mark's strengths and weaknesses. His ambition was his driving force, his company his golden calf, and his carefully cultivated public image his most prized possession. Sarah knew exactly where to strike. She needed time, resources, and a strategy that would dismantle his empire from within, just as he had dismantled her life. The first step was to get back on her feet. She began taking small freelance design jobs, forcing herself to engage with her passion again, slowly rebuilding her financial independence. She started therapy, not to forgive Mark, but to channel her rage into productive action, to heal enough to be strategically lethal. She immersed herself in understanding the tech industry, Mark's company structure, and the intricate world of venture capital. She started reading, researching, learning everything she could about intellectual property law, corporate espionage, and the often cutthroat world of startups. She didn't want to break the law, not directly, but she wanted to exploit every legal and ethical gray area Mark had himself reveled in. She spent late nights poring over his old business plans, pitch decks, and even casual conversations she'd recorded in her memory, searching for vulnerabilities, inconsistencies, anything that could be weaponized. She remembered a casual boast he'd once made about a key piece of proprietary code, a foundational algorithm for his company's main product, which he claimed to have developed solely. But Sarah remembered the sleepless nights they'd spent together, months before his company officially launched, where she had helped him brainstorm, sketch out UI flows, and even contributed conceptual design elements that were intrinsic to the algorithm's user interface and overall functionality. She hadn't written code, but her design contributions were undeniably interwoven with the core intellectual property. At the time, she was a loving partner, not a demanding stakeholder. But now, that distinction was blurring. Her most critical discovery came through a former colleague of Mark's, a programmer he had unceremoniously fired to cut costs. This individual, resentful and aware of Mark's shady dealings, was a treasure trove of information. He revealed that Mark had a habit of cutting corners, particularly when it came to licensing third-party software components and open-source libraries. He would often borrow snippets of code, rebrand them, and claim them as his own, especially early on when funding was tight. Specifically, he mentioned a critical, complex module within Mark's flagship software that handled data encryption. A module almost identical to one found in an obscure, open-source project from a small, defunct European collective. It was a calculated risk Mark had taken, betting no one would ever notice. But Sarah noticed. This was her opening. This wasn't about her money, not directly. This was about intellectual property, about the very foundation of Mark's company. This was about exposing his entire empire as a house of cards built on lies and theft. Sarah meticulously gathered evidence, archived versions of the open-source project, old forum posts detailing its development, and even her own design sketches from early in Mark's development phase, which demonstrated a direct influence on the disputed algorithm's conceptual framework. She consulted with intellectual property lawyers, carefully outlining her findings, asking hypothetical questions, building a bulletproof case. She also began to cultivate relationships with disgruntled former employees, quietly gathering testimonials about Mark's unethical practices, his aggressive management style, and his willingness to step over anyone to get ahead. She built a network of informants, not through bribery, but through shared grievances, a collective quiet simmering resentment against Mark. Her plan was multifaceted, patient, and designed for maximum impact. She wouldn't just sue him, she would expose him, publicly, comprehensively, and at the worst possible moment. She learned that Mark's company was on the verge of its Series C funding round, a critical stage before an anticipated IPO. This was her window. A single, perfectly placed crack could shatter his entire edifice. She waited. She watched. She perfected her strategy. The moment of execution was orchestrated with surgical precision, timed to coincide with Mark's company's final, high-stakes Series C pitch to a consortium of top-tier investors. Sarah knew the exact date and even, through her carefully cultivated network, the general time of the presentation. Days before the pitch, she initiated the first phase of her plan. She filed a series of carefully worded, legally sound claims. One was a formal intellectual property challenge regarding her conceptual contributions to the core algorithm, backed by her design sketches and extensive documentation. This was designed to be a nuisance, a cloud of uncertainty, rather than a direct hit. The real weapon was the second claim, an anonymous, detailed tip, complete with irrefutable evidence, sent to a prominent tech investigative journalist known for exposing corporate malfeasance. The tip meticulously laid out Mark's plagiarism of the open-source data encryption module. It included side-by-side code comparisons, archived forum links, and even corroborating statements from the disgruntled former programmer. Sarah ensured the journalist received this information just hours before the Series C pitch. She also made sure a lesser-known but widely respected tech blog, followed by many in the venture capital world, received an identical, anonymous tip. The impact was immediate and devastating. As Mark stood before the investors, beaming, presenting his polished pitch deck, phones in the room began to buzz. Alerts popped up. The investigative journalist had moved with lightning speed, publishing an exposé titled "The Foundation of Fraud: Is Mark's company name built on stolen code?" The smaller tech blog followed suit, citing additional sources. News of the allegations spread like wildfire through the closed circles of the tech and investment community. One moment, Mark was talking about valuation and market penetration. The next, a lead investor's face, initially attentive, clouded over with concern. A quick glance at a tablet, a whispered conversation, and the entire atmosphere in the room shifted from anticipation to palpable distrust. Mark, oblivious at first, continued his presentation, but the energy had drained from the room. He saw the investors exchanging worried glances, tapping away at their devices. When he finally paused for questions, the first one wasn't about revenue models or growth projections. It was sharp, direct, and delivered with a steely edge. "Mr. Mark's last name, can you address the recent allegations regarding intellectual property theft in your core encryption module?" Specifically, the claims concerning the defunct European collective open source project. The color drained from Mark's face. He stammered, his carefully rehearsed composure crumbling instantly. He tried to deny, to deflect, to dismiss it as a smear campaign, but the questions kept coming, each one more incisive, backed by evidence now readily available online. The investors, seasoned and risk-averse, saw the red flags waving violently. An intellectual property dispute, especially one involving the core technology and potential open-source license violations, was a catastrophic liability. It could lead to crippling lawsuits, product recalls, and even the complete devaluation of the company. Their investment, if they proceeded, would be at immense risk. The pitch, meant to be his crowning moment, dissolved into a humiliating interrogation. Mark, caught completely off guard, looked panicked, desperate. He saw his dream, his entire future, slipping through his fingers in real time. He saw the investors' faces harden, their laptops closing, their interest evaporating. Sarah wasn't physically present in that room, but her presence, her influence, was undeniable. She was the ghost in the machine, the architect of his demise, silently watching from the shadows as her meticulously laid trap sprang shut. The investors not only pulled out of the Series C funding, but their swift withdrawal sent shockwaves through the industry. Other potential investors, seeing the biggest players back away due to serious IP concerns, followed suit. The news of the funding collapse, directly linked to the IP allegations, became a secondary headline, further cementing Mark's company's reputation as a high-risk, potentially fraudulent venture. The fallout was swift and absolute. Within days, Mark's company was in a death spiral. Without the Series C funding, they couldn't scale, couldn't innovate, and most importantly, couldn't fight off the mounting legal challenges that now emerged. The investigative journalist's exposé gained traction, prompting regulatory bodies and even other tech companies to look closer at Mark's past dealings. Employees, sensing the sinking ship, began to jump overboard. Evelyn, the investor Mark had so cynically used Sarah to get closer to, swiftly distanced herself, withdrawing her earlier investments and publicly condemning Mark's unethical business practices. Her reputation was paramount, and she wasn't going to let his downfall drag her with him. The public image Mark had so carefully cultivated, the brilliant tech visionary, the ethical entrepreneur, shattered into a million pieces. He was ridiculed in online forums, lambasted in industry publications, and became a cautionary tale of hubris and fraud. The intellectual property claims against him, including Sarah's, gained significant ground. While her claim about conceptual design was harder to prove definitively for direct financial gain, the open-source plagiarism was a clear-cut violation, leading to a massive lawsuit from the original developers of the code. Mark's company, unable to secure new funding or fight the legal battles, was forced into bankruptcy within months. He lost everything: his company, his reputation, his financial security, and his future in the tech industry. He was effectively blacklisted, his name synonymous with intellectual property theft and corporate deceit. He became a pariah, shunned by former colleagues and investors, reduced to a ghost of his former self. His ambition, once his greatest strength, had become the instrument of his undoing. Sarah, meanwhile, had found an unexpected sense of peace. The raw pain had receded, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. She had rebuilt her life, her design career flourishing, her financial stability restored through hard work and determination. She never publicly gloated, never contacted Mark again. Her revenge wasn't about petty satisfaction, it was about balance. It was about rectifying a profound injustice, about ensuring that the man who had so casually destroyed her life would face a reckoning of equal, if not greater, magnitude. She had watched his nightmare unfold, not with hatred, but with a detached sense of justice. She had grieved, she had cried, she had been broken. But in the ashes of her own devastation, she had found the strength to rise, not just healed, but transformed into the architect of a perfectly executed, truly professional revenge. The story of Sarah and Mark serves as a stark reminder: some wounds run deeper than money, deeper than a broken heart. They create a profound need for balance, for a reckoning that transcends mere apology or financial restitution. It teaches us that true pro-revenge is not about momentary outbursts of anger, but about the cold, patient, strategic dismantling of an opponent's world, piece by agonizing piece. It's about leveraging their own arrogance, their own flaws, against them, and watching their carefully constructed reality crumble under the weight of their own misdeeds. Mark learned the hard way that when you push someone to the absolute limit, when you take everything from them, you might just ignite a fire that will consume your own empire. For Sarah, the moment she stopped crying was the moment his nightmare began, and the universe, in its own slow, methodical way, balanced the scales. What is the most satisfying revenge story you've ever heard? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more pro-revenge narratives.